the opportunity to bring together people who have been competitors on the gridiron to come together and share those experiences is something that I don't think Michigan and Ohio State do, or USC and UCLA do, or any other great rivalries. I think it's unique to Harvard and Yale and a recognition of the special relationship that the two schools have. So I'd like to welcome everybody. We've got a brief agenda. We have several speakers, and then we'll have some remembrances from Joe Wallen, Yale 2000, and Mike Brown, Harvard 1980. The JV game does kick off at 1 o'clock. I do not think we'll be finished by then, but please, when we're finished, you can proceed directly out to the stadium where the game is being played. And before we start, I just want to do one thing. As all of us in this room remember who played, being part of a team, there's an awful lot of things that go into making a team successful, coaches and players. And most importantly, and sometimes overlooked, are some of the other people, trainers, staff, and most importantly, the men who have, over the years, run our equipment rooms, locker rooms, kept us all in good gear, and kept us on the playing field. And there's a very good friend of ours here today who hasn't been back for a while, but I'd like to please recognize Chet Stone, who was equipment manager. We're going to start the program. Ask Coach Murphy to come up, the Tom Stephenson family head coach of football for Harvard. He's got a few minutes, make a couple of comments, and then he's off to get ready for the game tomorrow. But Coach Murphy, welcome and thank you.
Shuddy, great to see you, buddy. On behalf of the Harvard football family, I'd like to welcome everyone to the 131st edition of The Game. For the past 21 years, it's been my great privilege to be a very small part of this very special rivalry. And in my humble opinion, it's a rivalry that really represents all that's good about college athletics. And on this weekend every year, it's just as important to our students, our players, and our alumni as it is the folks at Auburn or at Alabama. As far as the 2014 version of this game goes, it's going to be a dynamite. This is a tremendous Yale football team, extremely well coached, and will be by far the best team that we have faced this year. As far as our football team is concerned, I could not be prouder of a bunch of young men and assistant coaches. We have not been a dominant team, but we've been a very tough, resilient team, a team with great team chemistry that's found a way to win every week. So what does that mean for this game? Can we do it again? Well, that's why we play the game. Thank you, have a great weekend, and happy Thanksgiving.
One of the special aspects of this lunch is to have the son of the founder, Tim Clark, with us here today. Tim is going to come up and make a few comments and give us a little bit more about the history of this great lunch and the things that your father and Walt Lindbergh did to get it started. Thanks.
Well, I don't have to rush off anyway, for the team's not waiting for me, so I'm with you as long as you'll let me. We'll find out. I'll tell you, this is quite a sight to look around and see this crowd. My father would be very, very proud of the whole thing. This all started in the back room of Maury's about 70 years ago when they decided to get together and enjoy the remembrances that they had. And for me to be asked to come and speak here is kind of fun. I go and talk about my dad and tell you a little bit about what he did. Every once in a while I try to tell you a little about myself too, but my athletic career was quite short, and it only takes me a second to do that. I've been reminded by Dick Flasby many times, so we'll put that in the background. But my father, Dick said, get something new. I said, look, I can embellish a little bit. I I have to tell you the facts as they lie out. And my father was a very unusual athlete, and in his day, he was probably one of the best known sportsmen in his field. He played Yale 15 times and beat him 11. He played in 4 to 5 different sports: football, hockey, crew, polo, and track. And he always said that the best thing he ever did was to play polo, because a polo handicap was the greatest incitement to any place you wanted to go in the world. It was a good thing to have. If you had a good high polo handicap, you could, most doors would open up to you. They didn't pay as much attention to football players in those days, but he found it was pretty helpful. And he was playing polo at Myopia out here on the North Shore with a guy named George Patton, who went on to be quite successful and famous. And General Patton had a very simple theory. He said, the best leaders that I know are athletes who are smart athletes. And he went around, he could go and pick out about anything, any leaders he wanted and whatnot. So in the Third Army, as they went across Europe, they had more All-Americans than any other army or any other background. And they also had one of the finest restaurant managers in Boston was picked up to run their kitchen, so they had a pretty good time. And whenever they would travel around the places, they'd have lovely lunches, and then they'd play football and touch football or baseball, things like that, so they all competed. And the idea was to really encourage people to get their incentive up and get their competition up. And Dad always said, he said that, you know, the competitions against Yale were by far the best that I ever had. I just loved to play Yale. I said, yeah, because you won so often. Maybe that's why. But no, he really felt it was one of the best competitions that he ever had. And he had lived I point this out a little bit, he lived a little bit of a sheltered life after he got out of college. He lived in Boston, and he didn't know a lot of Yale people. And we just didn't know them. And he had, in the service, these guys, they all got to be friendly and got to be good friends of each other. And so he and Walter Levering and a guy named Ted Harrison, Jigger Harrison, he played for Yale, 4 different sports. He pursued the ball all his life and was a coach at Andover, a wonderful fellow, very good friend of the Bush families. And he was one of the first ones that set it up. And they all got together, about 8 or 9 of them, in the back room at Maury's. And they did that one year, and then they came up here the next year, and Conan was president of the college up here when that started and everything, and he would not let them drink on the campus, so they had to work out a few things to be able to get things put together. And I look over, I see my friend Carol Lowenstein over here. Carol, you look at this crowd, remember we used to get on the phone for a week ahead of time to try to get 15 or so people to turn up, because you meet in Carey Cage and you couldn't even get a beer. So we worked that around, and we had a very nice time doing it, and slowly it's developed into something that is really an outstanding luncheon for everybody that comes and sees it. And I'm thinking that a couple of things. One, my father had a very fixed rule about the Yale game. He said the 2 things: I never give odds. He never gave odds, and all the time he bet. We used to drive him down in the car, and he'd go make his bets and things, take care of it. And then he said, the other thing is, you never spend the night in New Haven. Never, he said. I don't know where that came from, but I think when he stayed there, he had the band woke him the first night of their football game in 1928, and he never forgot that. He couldn't get a good night's sleep after that, and so he wouldn't do that. And we used to have, I remember Carol and I driving him back up here a couple of times late at night. We'd pull back, and my mother'd be at the door, and he said, did Harvard win? And if they won, why she'd get the rest of the family down and get Dad upstairs. And if they didn't win, why, he'd come in, he'd be pretty quiet and sober, and he'd walk himself up. But he had a lot of very good times doing it. And it was the kind of a thing that you really just have memories that go back a long, long time. And I look at the friendship that he and Walter Levering developed. They were on the phone every year just before the game, setting the luncheon up and things like that. They had a very good time. Now, I have going to end, I think, because I'm watching the time here, but my father had a little poem he used to like to say. I bought him for lunch, by the way. I always take that picture out. That's what he looked like, and we're trying to figure out where that picture was taken. I think it's the Yale Bowl, but we're not sure, but that's a little bit what he looked like. athletic. He stood 6'6" and was 230 pounds, and he didn't have to look back too often. But the little poem he used to say that he enjoyed, and he would end up the luncheons with it: when I'm in a sober mood, I worry, work, and think. And when I'm in a drunken mood, I gamble, screw, and drink. And when my time is over and my days have come to pass, I hope they'll bury me upside down so the world can kiss my ass.
Thank you, Tim. I'm glad we fixed the drinking issue. That's sort of, I also think that Coach Rizzo and Coach Murphy at 6'6", 230, I think they both would have liked to talk to your dad. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate your comments as always, and it gives everybody a sense of the great history, the great tradition that's involved, and this lunch is part of it. It's my great privilege now to introduce and turn over the mic to Pat Ruey, who is the president of the Yale Football Association. Somebody I've gotten to know quite a bit over the last 10 years. Has done a great job with the Yale Football Association, and I thank all of you and your Yale teammates, classmates for being here today to help celebrate.
Thank you, Brian. It's always a tough act to follow Tim. This is the first year I've had to do this, but we'll struggle through. So this is a very exciting year. We're coming in with one loss and Harvard again with none. It's going to be a beautiful day. I think we're averaging 44 or 45 yards a game, and I don't think Harvard's given up that, or points a game, I don't think Harvard's given up that many in the whole year. So it's going to be a very interesting clash. I want to thank, on behalf of the Football Association, everyone here from Harvard for your hospitality. I also want to send out a couple of shouts. Don Scharf isn't here with us today. He's a fixture at this luncheon. He's battling some health issues, but he's winning. And hopefully he'll be back next year in New Haven. And Carm Koza, you might notice he's not here. Coach Koza. Hank Higdon pointed out that this is the first time in 18 years that I didn't drive Coach Koza up here to the Harvard game, and it kind of leaves a hole in your heart that he's not with us. But I can tell you as well that he is doing very well. He was actually in the hospital, and I went to visit him. I know I was supposed to be brief, but I had this little touchy story, if you don't mind. So he actually had a roommate, Harvard guy. His name was Doug Smith, and I got to know him, as going up and visiting him. And unfortunately, things weren't going as well for Doug as they were for Coach, and he was kind of knew his end was near, and he was on his deathbed. He got his nurse, his wife, his daughters, and his 2 sons up in the room with him. And he asked for 2 witnesses, a camcorder, lights, and a mic. And once everything was set up, he solemnly began to speak. And he looked around the room, and I'm sitting in the corner witnessing this. He says, "My son, Patrick, I want you to take all the properties up on Science Hill. And to my lovely daughter, Katie, I want you to take all the apartments off Worcester Square. To my oldest son, Patrick, I want you to take all the professional offices and businesses off the green. And to Sarah, my love and of my life, please take all the residential buildings down on the Sound." I have to say that I and the nurses and all the witnesses were pretty much blown away. None of us realized this man's extensive holdings. He did go to Harvard. And as Doug slipped away, the nurse said, "Mrs. Smith, your husband must have been such a hard worker to accumulate all this property." And she said without a beat, "Property? The asshole had a paper route." So I guess not all Harvard guys are successful. But anyway, I'll be back up here later to introduce Joe Wallen. I'm going to give the mic up to the athletic directors. But thank you again, Brian, for all your hospitality.
Thanks, Pat. My name is Tom Beckett. I'm the Director of Athletics at Yale. And like Coach Murphy, this is my 21st luncheon at this spectacular event. And we want to thank the Friends of Harvard. Brian, thank you very much for hosting yet again a delightful afternoon and luncheon for all of us. I met Billy Cleary 21 years ago, and he was the athletic director at Harvard, coached the hockey team, won a national championship, maybe one of the finest men that college athletics has ever known, clearly the greatest hockey player that's played college hockey. And I'd like Billy, where are you, Billy? I'd like you to just stand up because I want... So all of you Yale men who have not had the opportunity to try and shake Billy Cleary's hand, you now know where he's sitting. You should do that. So as an athletic director, you would hope that every student athlete in your program has the opportunity to experience what these incredible men of Harvard football and the men of Yale football are experiencing this year and what they will get to experience tomorrow. It's a remarkable accomplishment what both teams have done coming into this game, the 131st, the opportunity to play for an Ivy championship. We don't have to worry about what happens on any other campus in the league, and the nation is watching these two teams on this national stage. We have game day here, Lee Corso and his crew, a spectacular opportunity for our universities to get their proper due around the nation and beyond. So I want to congratulate Coach Murphy for the work he's done to build an incredible program throughout his 21 years, and I want to thank him also for providing Tony Reno, our head coach, with the opportunity to work with him for 3 years. Tony has brought some incredible characteristics that he learned from Tim, and we're really proud of what Tony has built. So all the best to all the participants. Tonight, there's another wonderful event featuring Harvard Yale student athletes. Our two volleyball teams tied for the Ivy Championship, so we share that distinction of an Ivy title. But tonight, the winner of the volleyball match here on campus represents the league at the NCAA tournament. So a great weekend for all of us. Thank you again for this invitation. All the best.
Tom and Pat, thank you both very, very much. You never disappoint with your joke, Pat. Never. Fantastic. Thank you. It's my privilege now to introduce the Director of Athletics for Harvard, Bob Scalise, the Nichols family Director of Athletics. And Bob, please come on up. Thank you.
It's always my pleasure to say a few words. I have to say that we're all very serious today. There's no kidding around, there are no jokes. So I just went to a few of my Yale friends, and I'll call you friends. And I'll just say, well, what could I say that would really piss off everybody from Yale? And they said, well, you did a good job back when you first came in, when you said that this was great to have this event in the Hall of History, and we're thanking Yale for their part in Harvard's athletic history. And you notice that this has all changed. There used to be a picture over here from 1968, and we took that down. Out of respect to Yale, we took that down. And then even last year, I talked about the series and how Yale had won 65 times and Harvard had won something like 57, and then there were 8 ties, and then I said something like, but you all at Yale, unfortunately you all think of a tie as a loss, so I guess the series even, so that went over really big. But seriously, I just want to say that all of these comments and everything are said out of deep respect and admiration. And one of the panels on our board down there talks about the history and tradition that we have here at Harvard. And one of the panels is dedicated to our rivalry with Yale. And it's a unique and timeless rivalry and collaboration. It's a partnership with a respected rival. And that's how we all view this. And I'll tell you right now, nothing could be better than where we are today. Okay? Mighty Yale, 8-1. Okay, with a juggernaut offense, scoring left and right. And little old Harvard, we're just eking our way through, trying to stay, stay competitive. Game day, ESPN is going to film the JV football game and basically talk about that on game day and the broad participation. This is a wonderful day. Thank you all for being part of it. Thank you all for making it special. And good luck to both teams tomorrow, and let's have a great football game. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody for your comments. Several years ago, we introduced the notion of having some speakers, one each from Yale and Harvard, to talk about some remembrances of their participation. It's been a great success. We're going to continue that this year. And I'm going to ask Pat to come back up to introduce Joe Whalen, class of 2000 at Yale, who is going to speak on behalf of the Yale football.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Bob. I loved your remarks this year, Bob. They were good. So in 1999, Yale lost its opening game on a fluke play. With very little time left, we were up and we actually blocked the extra point, Brown's extra point, to win the game. They picked up the ball, lateraled it to the side, ran in for 2 points and won the game. So that was our start. And then we came back and won the next 8 games. And then in what has become Yale legend, our quarterback, Joe Whalen, checked out of the Yale infirmary that morning. We're not sure if it was 102, 103, I've heard 104, but he had a pretty bad fever. And he came straight to the Yale Bowl. The going was tough that day against Harvard. We had a great running back, Rashad Bartholomew, and Harvard shut him down pretty tough. And the whole first half went that way. The first play, the second half, another run, Harvard shut down. And Coach Sidlicki basically turned the offense over to Joe, the quarterback. And we didn't run another running play the whole game. So Joe threw that day 67 passes, 42 of them for completions, including the last pass of the game, which is the game winner, to Eric Johnson, which we call down at Yale the catch. I'm sure you guys have a different name for it up here. And it was the best catch of Eric Johnson's career until he married Jessica Simpson. So that day, Joe set 5 NCAA records, and that season, I think he set 22 Yale records to become the most prolific Yale offensive player to that time. So I'm sitting with some of his classmates, teammates, and they said, "You sure? You sure you want to do this, guys?" Bring Joe up, but I am, because Joe is a legend, a great man, and was just honored last week as one of the all-time greats in Yale football, and Joe Whalen's going to speak on our behalf. Joe?
Sorry, I'm down here. For us vertically physically challenged people, adjust the mic. But thanks, Pat, for the great introduction, and thanks to the Harvard Football Association for hosting this great event this year. Obviously very exciting times for both programs. Harvard coming in 9-0, and then Yale at 8-1, and both fighting for Harvard the outright championship, and Yale for a piece of the championship. It's obviously a great thing when both programs have that on the line. And then obviously, Pat, thank you for picking me for the Yale Football Association, and hopefully I don't screw this up like all my teammates think I will. But it's crazy that it's been 15 years since that memorable game, and I saw in the attendee list a lot of our former players from Yale, and then there's a few former players from Harvard that are in attendance today. So each of us have our different perspectives on the game, and it was a tremendous game. But I want to take you guys back a little bit, because when I was recruited, I was the only family member to go to college from my immediate family. So going to college was a big deal, and making the decision to go to college was a big deal. And it was between Harvard and Yale. And Coach Murphy was here, and I think he left, but he was recruiting me on the Harvard side and Carm Koza on the Yale side. And I have the utmost respect for Coach Murphy. He's a genuine guy. My family loved him. And obviously, Carm Koza, you can't say enough about that guy, Hall of Fame coach. So I went to my dad and I said, Dad, what do you think? I had this tough decision. And my dad, my nickname is Boom, for those of you guys that don't know. So it's like, Boom. He's like, when we went to Harvard, he's like, I just looked at all those players up there, and I said, they looked a little soft. He's like, I don't know if you can go there, because I look at their offensive linemen and I know that I can beat every one of them in arm wrestling. And so, my dad is this blue collar, guy from East Cleveland, and so I was like, all right, Dad, well, I guess I'll follow your judgment. And he's like, plus this Koza guy, he's a Cleveland guy. He's like, what's the matter with you? Stick to your roots. So I said, all right, Dad, well, I'll do that, and the rest is history. So that's what took me to Yale, and then was able to play in Carm Koza's last season, and we were part of his last recruiting class. There was 37 strong. When we were going into the game, that memorable game in 1999, there just was 13 of us that were left from that recruiting class, which everyone would be like, wow, that's a big difference. But those 13 guys, a lot of them in the room here today, were solid, and still some of my best friends in the world. But with that said, going into sophomore year, Coach Jack Selecki came into the mix, and I was still playing defensive back and returning kickoffs. And so I went to Coach Selecki's office and said, hey, Coach, our quarterbacks last year threw 8 touchdowns and 26 interceptions. What do you think if I tried out to play quarterback in I think it was 1997? And he looked at me, looked me up and down, and he said, well, you're not much to look at, so you can try all you want, but good luck, son. And that was his message to me. So went out for first practice, spring ball that year, and I was 9th on the depth chart at quarterback. Called my dad, and I said, hey, Dad, I got good news and bad news. Good news, I told the coach that I'm switching to quarterback. Bad news is that I'm 9th on the depth chart. And my dad, in his most canny way, would be, well, one, I don't know if I should be happy if you're 9th on the depth chart, but why the hell does Yale carry 9 quarterbacks? It's like, no wonder you guys were bad last year. So, long story short, quickly moved up the ranks and was able to take over the starting job in 1997 as a sophomore, and which led us up to the senior year, in which Pat referenced in my introduction. Going into the Harvard game that year, obviously, we were 8-1, on an 8-game winning streak, and Harvard was 5-4, but with those 4 losses, I think it was by a combined points of like 15. So all close games, and so we knew that we were going to be in for a battle. The one thing that I will say is that when we were preparing for the game, Joel Lamb, and Joel is now the assistant head coach here at Harvard, and he was a '93 graduate, and he was our offensive coordinator at the time and my quarterbacks coach. And so, we'd always go through and prepare and go through film play, and one thing that he always used to say is like, well, this route, that looks like a bastardized post, or that looks like a bastardized, in route. And everyone's looking at him like, what the hell does bastardized mean? And it's like, does that mean you're supposed to zig when you zag, or whatever it is? But so all of our receivers, we didn't know what the hell to do. So maybe that was why he let me call every play from the line of scrimmage in the second half. But going into that game and just going through some of the names of some of the players that were on both sides, and one name in particular that I definitely want to mention, from the Harvard side was Isaiah Kaczynski. He was an awesome linebacker for Harvard, and he, at that time, and I don't know if it's been beaten, but he was the only 40-game starter in Harvard history going into that year. And I don't know if that's been met or matched yet, but he was a Buckus Award finalist, and so we knew we were going up against a great defense, and their front seven was just powerful. I think they led the Ivy League in defending against the rush with less than 60 yards a game. But we were confident that we were coming in and we're gonna go in with a balanced attack, and Rashad's here today, and Rashad was our all-Ivy running back, and so we tried to run the ball against them in the first half, and we couldn't get it done. And so we tried again, first play, second half, and it didn't work. And then just like all of us, probably as we were growing up as kids, you get an opportunity to play backyard football, and then that's basically what happened to me in the second half of the Yale-Harvard game. Coach Zulecki and Coach Lamb were like, hey, get everyone on the line of scrimmage and call every play, and let's see what happens. And so, being a selfish quarterback that I am, I did not call one running play. Rashad still hates me to this day. But we threw the ball 51 times in the second half, and because of that, you can imagine, some of the people that were worn out on the Harvard side of the defense. So they were shuffling in defensive linemen back and forth. I think they had about 10 different defensive linemen that played that day. One of their defensive backs, I don't know if he's here, Kane Waller. Kane was a great corner for them, and midway through the third quarter, we saw him puking right on our numbers on the field, which was pretty entertaining to see. I later found out, and I don't know if this is true or not, but Kane was a son of one of the WWF or WWE guys, Jimmy the Superfly Snuka. And I don't know if any of you guys watch wrestling out there, but I did as a kid, and I thought that was pretty comical. Another guy that was on the Harvard defensive line was Chris Nowinski, and a lot of you guys know that name. One for a lot of the work that he's doing present day on the research of concussions and some of the long-term effects. So he's doing some great work there. But one of the things that I always laugh about is after his career at Harvard, he also joined the WWE as a wrestler. So I don't know if that's a common thing that there's like the WWE comes to Harvard and recruits a lot of the football players. But maybe we should try that, Pat, at Yale. I don't know. But I'm going to end here quickly because one, I think everyone wants to get out to the JV game, and two, no one wants to hear a guy who's 15 years removed talk anymore. But I will say, going into that, as Pat put it, the catch, and that we were going back and forth with you guys at Harvard, and it was 21-17, and with 2 minutes and 53 seconds left on the clock when we got the ball, and went down the field and scored with 29 seconds left. And I was in the post-game press conference and interview with Tim Murphy, and like I said, I have the most respect for Tim. And the first thing he asked, and for those of you that didn't see that play, Isaiah Kaczynski, in my short stature of 5'10", which is probably giving me a quarter of an inch, he tipped the ball at the line of scrimmage that made it fell a little bit short of Eric Johnson, which Eric dove right before the ball hit the ground and caught it. And Tim asked the question to all the reporters in the post-game interview. He said, "If I raise our hands, how many of you think that ball hit the ground?" And about half of the people raised their hand. And so he's like, "That's what I thought." And I think he left the room because he pissed off. And I said, so the next question that I asked, in a non-arrogant kind of way, was, now that Tim's gone, of those people that had their hands raised, how many of you thought that we would score, even if it did hit the ground, since it was only second down? And all raised their hand. But with that said, obviously, the memories created in the game are phenomenal. They're stories that we all have for life. And like anything, even on ESPN this morning, when Calvin Hill was being interviewed by the ESPN analyst, you talk only about the stories, and people only ask you what your record was against Harvard, what your record was against Yale. And these are the memories that are the fondest memories. And I know I take them with me every day, and it's always great to meet people from Harvard and also fellow Yale alumni and talk about the great memories that we've created over time. But thank you all for the time, and I appreciate you guys having me here to speak to you today.
Terrific comments. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joe. I'm going to ask one of my fellow Friends of Harvard Football board members, Dan Mee, to come up to introduce our final speaker. Dan and Mike are teammates, and we're going to turn it over to Dan. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. One of my jobs on the board of the Friends of Harvard Football is to coordinate these 15 to 20 events that we have around the country, including this dinner, this luncheon when it's held here. A few months back, we were deciding, okay, we need a speaker who would be good, and I immediately thought of Mike Brown, who was captain when I was a junior. And when I called Brownie up and said, "Brownie, I'd like you to speak," he said, "Dan, when I get excited, every third word's an F-bomb. Are you sure you want me to be speaking?" And then let me get back to you, Brownie. No. Mike Brown was an unbelievable captain. We were, in 1979, to put it kindly, a ragtag bunch. We had injuries up and down, and to keep the morale of that team together was something Herculean. He was a captain's captain. He was outstanding, and I'm really looking forward to hearing him talk about that season. Mike Brown.
Thank you very much, Dan. It's a real pleasure to be here today. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about the Harvard season and then a few minutes talking about the Harvard-Yale game. We'll probably talk for about 10 minutes or so, because I know we're trying to get to the JV game. The Harvard-Yale game in 1979 was a game where a 2-6 Harvard team matched up against an 8-0 Yale team. It was a game where a Harvard team, as Dan Mee just mentioned, that was really duct taped together with injuries and all sorts of problems, lined up against a defense, an offensive team that lined up against a defense that was ranked first in the country against the run. Yale's defense had only allowed something like 530 yards against all season. It was also a Harvard-Yale game where 72,000 fans showed up to root on the teams. It was the largest crowd in the Yale Bowl since 1954. And it was also a game that the New Haven Register called last summer the biggest upset in the 100-year history of the Yale Bowl. What the game wasn't was a game where the Harvard team went down to play the undefeated Yale team with the idea of playing spoiler to ruin their undefeated season. We also didn't go down to Yale to blemish their Ivy League championship. We really had so much more respect for Carm Koza, Ken Hill, Tim Tumpane, Zinger, Sully, and the rest of the Yale guys. We went down for something much more important than that. We went down for redemption and vindication, and to prove to ourselves that we were really a good team that had run into some bad problems. We went down to Yale to create a legacy so that we could live with our season for the rest of our lives. On a lighter note, 1979 was an awesome year to be in college. The economy was on its ass. Jimmy Carter was president. Mortgage rates were 13%. Christy Brinkley was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And the drinking age in the state of Massachusetts was 18 years old. It wasn't, however, a very good time to be a part of the Harvard football program. We hadn't had a winning season since 1976. We had just lost our starting quarterback, Larry Brown, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and expectations were pretty low. The hope was that we'd have an exciting season because we had a 6'4" quarterback named Brian Buckley who had a rifle arm, and everyone was looking forward to having line up in the shotgun and throw 70-yard bombs all season to Richie Horner, our all-Ivy wide receiver. But as things work out, Brian had to take a year off for academic reasons. But that was okay, because we had Ronnie Kuchar. Ronnie Kuchar was an athlete from the West Coast, probably one of the most highly recruited high school players in the country, and at the time, the most heralded recruit that Harvard had ever had. Ronnie's high school team as quarterback had gone 36-0. They played one team during his senior season. They were winning 60-0 at the half, and the team didn't even come out after the half to play in the second half. Ronnie had something like 5 high school national records to his credit. But again, Ronnie also had to take a year off for academic reasons. Well, that was okay with us. In fact, it was even better than okay, because that meant that Judson Burke St. John, Berkey, was going to be our starting quarterback. Berkey was wicked smart. He knew the multi-flex offense better than anybody. Berkey had a really good arm. He could run. He had a presence like Joe Montana in the huddle. And he had led our freshman team to an 8-1 record, losing only to Yale in the last game of the season. The season starts. We play Columbia. We beat Columbia. Everybody beat Columbia. I think even Columbia beat Columbia. Second game, UMass, big, tough, strong team. Berkey goes down during the game with a bad knee. In comes Mike Buchanan, a sophomore quarterback from Alabama. We lose to UMass 10-7. Second game, BU. Buchanan throws an interception, makes the tackle, keep the guy out of the end zone. We get in the huddle, the defense turned the ball over right away, and Mike Buchanan starts to call a play in his southern drawl. Power I ride. And then he stops and spit out the biggest mouthful of blood I've ever seen. Everyone was horrified. Off the field Mike went to get his jaw shut, broken jaw. And then in came Mike Sprzinski. And Mike's sitting back in the back of the room. Everyone knows that Mike's an excitable guy. And as urban legend has it, he was so excited to enter the game that Durkee and Tom Beatrice had to call the first next 2 plays. We lost that game. On to Cornell. Smuzz goes down with a bad ankle. Joe Lottie comes in. We lose to Cornell. Burke St. John's comes back against, I think it was Dartmouth, still hobbled. We lose to Dartmouth 10-7. We lose to Princeton 9-7. We lose to Brown in the mud. And now we're faced with the last 2 games of the season, 1 win, 6 losses. We were really psyched to play Penn because they were winless, and we thought we could definitely win this game. We had a great week of practice. Everyone was excited, lots of noise. We wake up Friday morning, and it was like a punch in the gut. The Boston Globe had a full-page article in their Sports Plus section. It was a black page with an empty Harvard football helmet, and it said something like "trouble out at the stadium." It was basically an article that went something like, "What's wrong with Harvard football?" And the headline basically read, the Harvard football team was looking down the barrel at having the worst record in the school's history in 105 years. And then it went on to talk about the fact that recruiting was too tight and academic standards were too high. Durkee, I'm not sure if we would go along with that. But the team did not, fall back. We got psyched and we took it out on Penn. We beat Penn something like 41-27, and after the game, the locker room was full of cheers. Beat Yale, beat Yale, beat Yale. We were ready. We spent an awesome week of practice. It was all business. Everyone was focused, and off we went down to the Yale Bowl for practice. I remember that night at the Yale Bowl. It was cold. The stadium was huge. The wind was blowing, and it was eerily quiet. The team was just totally focused. And I also remember that feeling that all seniors have, that bittersweet feeling that I knew we had the biggest game of our season ahead of us. But like all the seniors, I also knew that that day would be the last day that we put on the pads. That night, we went back to the internationally chic and famous Yale Motor Inn, and Joe Restic put on a speech, an X and O's demonstration that I think blew the whole team away. He drew up play after play and showed how no matter what Yale did, that we could shift and beat them. And during his whole X's and O's speech, he kept on saying, "It's up to you guys, it's up to you." And then Joe Restic's demeanor changed. He became somewhat solemn. And he then went on and told us about his experience as a teenager during World War II in the OSS. The OSS later became the CIA. Joe Restic was one of 10 kids. His father was a coal miner at Czechoslovakian descent, and somehow Coach Restic was recruited to be dropped behind enemy lines, going back to his native village in Czechoslovakia, and then pulled out to gather intelligence. And Coach Restic told us that on a couple occasions, he was with grown men in life and death circumstances. And he told us how, in those circumstances, some men were stoic and brave. Some men prayed, and other men cried for their mothers. And he ended up tying that in to what stood before us the next day. And basically it said, "It's up to you guys to decide how you're going to face this challenge." And he finished off by saying a couple times, "It's up to you, it's up to you." We go to the Yale Bowl the next day. The pageantry was unbelievable. Mink coats, Bloody Marys. We show up. The Yale fans were a little bit cocky, and that really pissed us off. We entered the stadium, and we walked down the tunnel, and the Yale band was lined up in the tunnel. I was maybe 100 feet in front of the team, and they were playing the song Mickey Mouse. And I thought to myself, that's not a very good idea. As I got to the center of the field to take the coin toss with Tim Tumpain, the music stopped. And I turned around and I saw that there was a melee going on in the tunnel. Evidently, Orazio Latanzi decided to put an end to the song and popped the trombone player. He said, "We're ready to play." You know, the games in the history books, we won the toss, We ran 78 yards, 17 plays. Jim Callahan was unbelievable. Burke St. John was unbelievable. I'll also have to say, too, our defense all season long was unbelievable. They held 4 teams during the season to less than 10 points. And Yale turned over the ball 6 times, had a bunch of penalties, and just put themselves on their heels, and they couldn't come back. We won 22-7. I remember our team was ecstatic. The goalpost came down. Mike Durgan, a couple of months ago, said to me, he was so happy he didn't come down until Christmas. It meant that much to us. The punchline to the season, I think, is that Burke St. John ended up leading the Ivy League in passing with over 1,000 yards. Was voted to be the All-Ivy quarterback. Richie Horner led the league in passing touchdowns, and he was also All-Ivy. And I guess one other thing I'll mention in closing, because I have a few of my St. John's Prep classmates here, is that one of the very special things that I had really enjoyed as captain is I had 5 guys from St. John's Prep up in Danvers on my football team. Smuzz, Durgy, Matt and Jay Foley, and me. I even had the pleasure of playing with Matt and Jay in youth football, so I played for the Lions in Danvers in high school and also in college. And those guys will remember a famous story of Coach Fred Glatz, our high school coach, Bobby Glatz's dad. I'm not sure where Bobby is right there. During a halftime speech when the team was lagging and he wanted to get us going and create some urgency, he screamed at us, "Hell, blink your eye once and the half's over. Blink your eye again and the whole damn season's over." And as I was preparing for the speech today, I thought to myself, you blink your eye just a few more times and 35 years passes like that. And I have to say that there's probably not a day that goes by when members of the 1979 Harvard football team don't draw on the experience that we had that season. The experiences of teamwork, hard work, perseverance, and to know that no matter what, good things will happen if you never, ever, ever give up. Thank you.
Fantastic, Mike. Thank you very, very much. Again, thank you all for attending. It has been a terrific start to the weekend. The JV game did kick off at 1 o'clock. It is being played in the stadium. Invite all of you to come out and watch. Enjoy your time inside if you prefer to be warm. But otherwise, we'll see you in the stadium. Great game tomorrow. Thanks.